On today's show, is Leon Muggli worth a first-round pick? We'll talk about the left-handed defenseman on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, with Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down Leon Muggli's game in detail. Muggli is a Swiss left-handed defenseman who's been playing in the Swiss National League the entire season, has been looking real good, and we'll talk about what for a first round pick. We'll start off with the puck skills, the skating, and the physicality in the first segment. In our second segment, we'll pivot to the more in detail stuff, the decision making, the habits, the toolkit. And in our last segment, we'll talk about the best fit for Leon Muggli, where he ends up on draft day, and what his upside is. Before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you think of Leon Muggli, what you think of our breakdown, all that good stuff. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started here with Leon Muggli. Talk me through the profile, size, handedness, the kind of overall idea of what his kind of archetype is as a player.
Yeah, for sure. So Leon Muggli is a 6 foot, 176-pound left shot defenseman who's very young for the draft class. He's a July 9th, 06 birthday. So he's still going to be 17 years old when he is drafted, only turning 18 about a week after the draft is being held in Las Vegas. And this season, he played almost exclusively in the Swiss National League with EV Zug, which is a very strong program, and he was playing very consistent third pairing minutes with that team. And through 42 games, he logged 3 goals, 9 assists for 12 points. The production is solid, if not, but not quite fantastic. But he had a very clear role on that team. He was a play facilitator. He had a very responsible role defensively. He was playing with a stabilizing partner most of the time to ease his transition to the pro game. But there's a reason he stuck with that pro team all season long. He was an effective player. His team was better with him on the ice than and that is certainly a testament to the maturity in his game, especially as a very young draft eligible talent. So there's a lot to like in this player, but the puck skills specifically are perhaps not the brightest part of his game. He is a really intelligent, composed, cerebral player in how he approaches the game. But the puck skills are not necessarily something that elevate, but they're not poor necessarily either. They're perhaps a little bit middling. But let's start off here first and foremost, which what I think is the strongest of those puck skills, the passing ability. Probably a 5.5, maybe even a 6th grade on our rating scale, which Dobber prospects. He's a really simple passer. He doesn't look to make the Hail Mary stretch passes, but he keeps his passes quick and simple. There's always a decent amount of pace off of his passes, but they're always right in the hip pocket of his teammate, and he makes the lives of the players he plays with a lot easier, especially in the break. And the passing game is something that has stood out in my viewings quite consistently. It hasn't really fluctuated. It's never like dynamic. He's not a raw playmaker, for instance, but he's a real facilitator on the ice through his passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. What I think is really interesting regarding Muggli's passing game is how he chains together plays. This isn't a player who needs to slow down. This isn't a player who needs to kind of take a second to figure out his options. He plays within the system extremely well. He plays instinctively really well. Again, his intelligence is really high, which helps him a lot in that regard. This is a player who overall, he's going to be able to play in the NHL at some capacity. I'd be really surprised if he doesn't, just because of how efficient he is with his passing ability. Like you said, he's not a stretch pass, 3-line pass type of guy. He's really kind of your 6 to 15 foot pass type of player. Keeps his pass short and simple, but what I really like is how quickly he identifies his options and finds them. This isn't a player who needs 10 seconds on the puck before figuring out the right pass to make. He scans beforehand. He knows where his teammates are. He hits them sometimes. I've seen him make a one-touch backhand pass, which isn't an easy thing to do as a defenseman. He's able to do that. because of his good scanning ability and his awareness of his teammates' location. Definitely his passing is his best trait. I think really what makes his passing good is his intelligence, and we'll get to that more in the second segment. I want to kind of pick your brain on his shot because I haven't seen much I haven't seen much threat from his shooting ability. Would you agree?
I would. I'd give it maybe a 4 grade. It's not like a black hole. Like he can score goals, and especially when he moves up in the offensive zone into that high to mid slot if it's wide open, which does happen. At least like in international games, he scored a couple goals when those defensive structures aren't overly compact and he has that space to move up into dangerous areas. He can score from those, but in terms of NHL projection and what we've seen from him in the Swiss National League, and he scored 3 goals in 42 games this season. I think that's a decent indication of the overall goal scoring and shooting threat. Mechanically, he's fine, a little bit subpar. There isn't all that much weight behind his shot. He relies on the weight he does have to get power behind his shot. So him being 176 pounds isn't necessarily a benefit in that category either, because he uses a lot of downforce and doesn't have all that much weight to force downwards in his shot. So that said, the shot selection is decent. He shoots for rebounds really intelligently. So he's able to find ways to create dangerous chances through his shot, even when the shot isn't a dangerous chance in and of itself. But he uses his shot most effectively as a playmaking or chaos creation tool than an actual goal scoring tool.
Yeah, I fully agree. Regarding his handling skill, though, it depends on how you view handling skill. Like for me, if Carter Yakimchuk is a 7, it's for a completely different reason, handling skill wise, than Leon Mugli. Leon Mugli is a pure underhandler. He never really kind of goes for the deke. He doesn't. He's not a player who's gonna dangle through 3, 4 waves of pressure. He's a player who keeps his puck touches short, keeps the puck on his stick, never really kind of handles back and forth or dangles the puck in front of him. Just keeps the puck in his hip pocket on receptions and makes a quick pass. I don't really see much handling skill. So if we're talking about skill purely, definitely below average, so about a 4 grade. But if we're talking about the habits of his handling skill, I think it's quite high. I really, really like underhandlers. If you look at some of my favorite prospects right now, Jaden Struble is one of my favorite. That's his specialty. Keeping his puck touches short and simple, not handling really too much, moving the puck up into the right pockets, that kind of thing. Personally, given what I like out of handling skill, I'd still give Mugli an average grade because of the habits. But if we're talking pure puck skill, pure ability to handle with the puck, it's below average, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think you covered it pretty well there. He keeps his puck touches very short. He's not one to try to dangle through opposing like layers of defense. And he doesn't use his handling as a big problem-solving tool. He might use it to try to release some pressure in a pinch. But it's really a very, very quick, like 1 second type of problem solving rather than entering problems wanting to solve them through his handling ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is also what you want to see in projectable defensemen, especially undersized projectable defensemen. You don't want those players to be the ones that are trying to just completely dissect the opposition through their handling ability, and even if it is a strength. And with Mugli, the raw skill there isn't the strongest in the world, but I really like how he uses it. He uses his handling to get the puck into a position where he can leverage his passing skill, right? Like he uses his handling
Yeah,
to facilitate his game overall, rather than to create through it.
absolutely. Let's talk about the skating real quick because I think it's still a big strength. I wouldn't give it a
For
6. I
sure.
would give it a 5.5 just because his mobility's good. He's able to get around the ice fairly well. He doesn't have separating speed, I don't think. He's really fluid. It helps him keep his gaps short on defense, more or less what you ask for from a defenseman. I don't think he really needs much more than that to be efficient, especially given his play style, given the way that he plays. He's not a puck mover. He's not a carry the puck up the ice type of player, but he's able to, again, just stifle rush defense scenarios, get the puck to the boards, get it off the boards with a quick move inside. That's about it. That's what you need from him. Physicality wise, I also think that not much to write home about there. I'd actually put him at below average physically. Um, I've
Yeah.
seen him get pushed around by smaller guys in the Swiss National League. Guys who have better leverage, better technique in board battles can get around him fairly easily. So I think that kind of sums it up regarding his physicality. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into our second segment where we get into the more in-depth stuff with Leon Muggli. We'll talk about the toolkits, the habits, and the decision making, which is probably his biggest area of strength. We'll get into that in just a second. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and far more, and you can bet on it all with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your team wins, and you can use that to bet on everything ranging from the Finals MVP to who you think is going to hit the next home run out of the park. You can even take your swings on the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, which are currently ongoing between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, filled with all of the league's best players, whether it be Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Sam Reinhart, Sasha Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, and the choice is yours on who you want to take your swings on. Visit fanduel.com/locked-on and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our second segment here where we talk about pretty much the most interesting aspect of Leon Mugli's game, and it's the toolkits, the habits, and the decision making. We'll start off with the toolkit because I think, like we mentioned, his handling skill facilitates his passing skill that we've talked about already. His passing skill, I think, again, the reason why he's such a good passer is because of his hockey sense, his intelligence. He doesn't have the big bomb of a pass in his toolkit. He doesn't have those cross seam passes, at least consistently in his toolkit. But what he does really well is use his intelligence combined with his passing in order to kind of push plays up the ice and make his teammates' lives easier. When you have a player like that, do you want to work on more so you can have a bit more of that passing ability in his toolkit, or do you keep the kind of skill set limited to what it is and focus on other things regarding his development? Because I mean, the way Mugli combines his brain and his passing right now works really well. Could it work better with more passing ability, more pure passing skill in his toolkit? What do you think?
I think it could. Like, I think that the playmaking game with him is the one offensive area where there's a decent amount of runway, and where you could get some pretty decent offensive output out of him in terms of development paths. He's already a player who tries to get a lot of pucks towards the slot. He likes to activate along the boards, and he's a little bit restricted to the perimeter there, which as a defenseman is perfectly okay, especially an undersized defenseman. That's not the end of the day. But because his selection of passes and his ability to read defensive structures and time his attacks along those flanks in the offensive zone is so good, I do think that there is some level of upside as a playmaking defenseman here. That said, I do think that the most realistic development avenue with him will be as a passing facilitator in the offensive zone. The type of player that you typically want to have stay around the blue line, but can really kind of be at the top of a horseshoe, maybe even a second power play quarterback. But rather than taking on the playmaking role, focus more on distribution and of deciding on in which area of the ice you want the next attack to occur, because he does read the game so well and he is a strong passer. I think that's where he likely ends up if there's more offense kind of churned out of his game. But the playmaking would be an interesting thing to develop. I just don't know how certain that would be in terms of hitting, even if like a lot of time and energy is invested into exploring that avenue of his.
Yeah, I think also the other part of that is another part of his toolkit is the skating and defensive game together. If he was a poorer
Yes.
skater, his defensive game wouldn't be nearly as efficient because, like we mentioned, he's a player who doesn't leverage weight that well. And with that kind of deficiency, I also don't think that this is something that just adding weight will fix. I think that Mugli really needs to work on leveraging better mechanics along the boards, learning to kind of lower his center of gravity and kind of get under opponents' hands in order to kind of win battles along the boards. I think he can get there. I think this is something that's easily teachable. And Mugli is definitely smart enough to incorporate that full time into his game. I think the main issue with Mugli is um, that the struggle with technique combined with the lack of weight. If he adds weight, sure, maybe that helps a bit, but it's really important to add that leverage. But like I said, the combination of skating and defensive game is really what makes him work defensively. Talk to me about kind of the details, the habits in his rush defense game, and how that is, I think for me, my favorite part of Mugli's game. Would you agree?
I've struggled with the rush defending. I've found that against junior competition, it's suffocating and incredibly effective. Against the pro ranks, I've seen him exploited and play a much more conservative style of rush defending. Against his own age group, he's really aggressive in defending the blue line. He uses his mobility to match footwork and keep a really, really tight gap and uses stick very actively and aggressively because he's not very afraid of being beaten to the outside or to the inside by rushing attackers. Against professional competition, however, he's a lot more conservative. He likes to lay back a lot more. He allows the entry and tries to suffocate play a lot more once it's already in the zone, rather than trying to prevent zone entries as a whole. But the skating is certainly what enables those flashes of aggressive rush defending that we have seen throughout the season, even against the pro ranks, which I'm sure what you're referencing here with it being a really clear strength. When it's good, it is very, very good. And he's able to leverage his high-end agility. He has really, really smooth pivots, very quick footwork, and he's able to match that footwork really well. He's able to read opposing rushers very quickly. You can see when they transfer their weight and really commit to one side or the other, and he reads that faster than most draft-eligible defensemen do, and including against professional competition, making it all the more impressive. So the flashes are bright with it. I do have some level of concern of how translatable that will be to the NHL level, if it is still going to be as big of a strength as we've seen it be against junior competition this season. But there's definitely room to grow there, especially if he's able to add some more weight and really integrate that type of board suffocation into his rush defending rather than it being pure stick work and him being able to play the body at times and that becoming an option for him. I think he'll be able to trust his rush defending ability a lot more against professional competition if he's able to do so.
Yeah, I think the other part of that is for me, it's how much of the conservative approach to rush defending is tactical rather than decisional with Mugli. I think it's really
Fair.
Yeah, I think it's really a tactical element because, like you said, in junior, the main change, obviously, the level of competition, but also the level of structure. Right, you've got a bit more tactical freedom. You've got a bit more ability to kind of showcase what you're good at. I think Mugli unleashed like that is really the real Leon Mugli. What I like to see from players is who are you when you don't have a specific role that's imposed to you, which is why I enjoy watching prospects at junior versus pro just to see how much their habits change, how much their decisions change, because that's usually a good indicator of either A, how confident they are in their abilities, or B, how well they're able to play within the system and what the system demands of them. I think it's a combination of both with Mugli. I think part of it is, I don't think he trusts himself as much against pros. Um, and I think B, the other part of that is his coach is being like, hey, we're going to play conservative rush defense, let the team set up, just close out the slot, close out the outside. And then once we get the puck, we recover, set up, and break out, which is usually how Swiss National League teams play. It isn't necessarily an in-your-face aggressive type of league. It's more of a tactical, kind of intelligent, kind of, work your systems against mine. We'll see which one is better type of thing. And I think that is usually that I think is a main culprit here with Mugli. But regarding his decision making specifically, I think that's part of it. Obviously, the conservatism off the rush in pro. But what I really like about his decision making is how quickly he sets up his next pass. Once possession's established, once the team gets ready for a breakout, it's not long before Mugli gets the puck and it's a quick pass right to the right player. And again, he consistently improves the condition of the puck with each pass he makes, which is something I really look for in prospects. Do you agree with that?
I fully do, and he's always very proactive in delegating the creative duties to the players around him, which is another element of self-awareness I like in his game a lot. Even at the junior level, he's never trying to do everything on his own. He knows his limitations and he knows his strengths. And he likes to delegate that play and keep his puck touches shorter, knowing that he has more dynamic players on the ice with him that can create in brighter flashes than he can individually. But there are also moments where he grabs a puck himself and he's mobile and intelligent enough to carry up the puck into the offensive zone, even make those type of three-zone rush, like they don't finish off in goals or scoring opportunities. They finish off in establishing a cycle and trying to get multiple opportunities rather than going for that one flashy scoring chance, doing it all on his own.
Yeah, absolutely. He's kind of the anti-Carter Yakimchuk in that sense. Like he's very
Yes,
much
in
the
most ways, yes.
yeah, absolutely. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third, where we talk about the upside, the projection, and which team would be the best fit for Leon Muggli. We'll get into that in a second. Just before, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our final segment, breaking down Leon Muggli's upside, his projection to the NHL, whether or not he's worth a first-round pick, and which team would be the best fit for him. We'll start off with the upside. I think that with Muggli, the upside isn't it's not, I mean, huge. I think that he's still capable of making a second pair, probably as a secondary piece on a second pair, very much that safer option next to a more offensive piece, a more creative, more inventive, more pace pushing, kind of aggressive player. I think that, for example, if you paired him with Sam Dickinson, I think that Muggli would have done a great job next to that player. He's a player who, in Sam Dickinson, you got a player who's in your face off the rush, who's going to be the main guy, who's kind of pushing you hard, who's pinching on you. Mugli's more comfortable rovering and kind of finding the right options. Again, he's really good at closing gaps when he does play on his game, when he's not worried about structure or tactics or whatever. But I still think that if you can pair him with a more aggressive defender, you'll get more out of Leon Muggli. Do you think that kind of the second, kind of number 4 defenseman is really the kind of the highest he can go? Is that realistic?
Yeah, like number 4 or like a 3B. I think that there's a scenario where he ends up being one half of a very good second pairing where there isn't necessarily a primary and a secondary piece. Because I think that like, if he hits his absolute upside, he's not a player that will need to be insulated, and he's also a player that will be very comfortable on puck and sparking the breakout, and will be putting up really good results in transition in both directions, both defending the rush and creating rush opportunities. And I think he's also very versatile. He is so intelligent; he can find a role in many different situations. I think, yeah, with a Sam Dickinson, he would work great, but also with a player like EJ Emery, I think he would work really well, where he's the primary puck mover, perhaps, or the spark plug in the breakout, to a like shut down defensive player, where it's a pairing that isn't expected to to generate much offense, but are very much just a possession dominant type of pairing. And I think that that's a role that I could see him in if he hits his upside. But more realistically, I think like a number 4, number 5 defenseman, perhaps in the mold of a Brett Kulak, is kind of the upside that we're looking at with a player like Leon Muggli. And Brett Kulak is playing some excellent minutes in the Stanley Cup Finals yet again at the moment with the Edmonton Oilers, and he was doing the same thing with the Montreal Canadiens as a secondary piece on a second pairing or a primary piece on a third pairing. So I think that if that's the upside that we're talking about here with Leon Muggli, there's a lot worse that you can do in like the early second round or even late first round, especially if you trust your development staff to be able to get that type of player out of this draft pick.
Absolutely. I also want to talk about the likely projection in terms of where he goes in the draft. I think that that's an interesting question. There's been rumblings of him being a first round pick, kind of a 20 to 30 type pick. I'm not as sold on the first round value. I think that there's, you know, where did Brett Kulak get picked, in the 3rd, 4th round?
Or 5th or
These types,
6th. Yeah.
something like that. Like, it's been a while, but I remember him being kind of a mid-round pick. I wouldn't say Mugli's a mid-round pick. I think that the certainty is a bit more there with Muggli, and even looking back in a redraft of the draft Brett Kulak went in, he probably would have been in that range, a kind of 35 to 50 type of prospect. Looking back there, I think that's a great spot for Leon Muggli to end up. How many prospects to draft play 200 games? Like, 30, 40? I could see Leon Muggli playing 200 NHL games. Like, this is a player who has a really projectable style, who's incredibly intelligent, who has some clear weaknesses that need work, but I think he can get there. It's just a matter of whether you're getting a 6th, 7th defenseman or a 4th, 5th defenseman. And for me, that puts him clear in the range. But if we're talking about first round fits? If let's say a contender really likes him and picks him, who do you think it is, and which would be kind of the best environment for him to develop in?
I think the answer is kind of the same for both on both fronts for me. The only fit that I really see in the first round for him is the Avalanche at 24th overall. Leon Muggli is very much up their alley in terms of being an intelligent, mobile defenseman who's already quite refined. He's young for the draft class. He has some runway to develop offensively, but he's reliable in his own zone. There's rush defending upside here. The Avalanche love the players that they can project quite simply in terms of like a 3-year time frame to be playing in an NHL role, and then trusting their coaching and development staff to foster that player from that position and from like within the NHL or AHL lineup and try to elevate them further from that regard. Think that 24th overall to Colorado would make sense, but I really do think that Muggli ends up going in the early second round, mid second round. I think that's the range that we're more talking about here, and you have a bunch of possibilities there. I think the San Jose Sharks could make sense. They have a couple picks in that range. The Minnesota Wild are picking at 45th overall. I think Leon Muggli is very much up their alley. They are never afraid of going for undersized but intelligent defensemen who could be defensive stalwarts without necessarily putting up a bunch of offensive numbers. So a lot of possibilities here for Leon Muggli.
Yeah, I think so. And, in terms of if we look at the major tournaments, which a lot of teams scout heavily, Muggli was really good at the World Juniors, was a key part of Switzerland's performances at multiple levels. I don't know. I think that there is a team that could see him as high as 25 and kind of look to swing on that selection. I could even see, for example, the LA Kings at 21st. Look at Leon Muggli and see someone really interesting. With the Kings, I mean, they have Brandt Clark. They've got their really intelligent, really solid kind of long range passer with a bomb of the shot from the point with good hands. If they're looking to pair him long term with a more mobile option, a player who can move the puck really quickly, who can move his feet a lot quicker than Brandt Clark does, Muggli's up their alley. I think that, and in terms of environments, like the guys that they have on their team, or that they had historically, the Alec Martinez's, the Mikey Andersons, they're really very much in this kind of mold of a player who skates really well, who defends well, is really a stick on puck defenseman. Because LA plays with a kind of board game. They play with a heavy board game on the forecheck. They play with a heavy board game even in the neutral zone. They have their defensemen. They have their defensemen pitched. They have their forwards coming back. A lot of pucks end up along the boards. A lot of pucks end up loose. Mugli's really good at creating loose puck scenarios. He's also really good at taking passes and playing him quickly to his forward. So if you're looking for a player who will disrupt the puck, get the puck to a center, the center will dump it in, then the forecheck starts, Leon Mugli's right up their alley stylistically. I think that would be a fantastic fit. But that's our final segment done and our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, again, please remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you thought of the episode. What do you think of Leon Muggli? If you want him on your team, all that good stuff. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports on YouTube's first 24/7 news channel. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue some prospect spotlights for this week. This has been Hattie Kalakesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, with Sebastian Hyde, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects. And we hope you tune in next time.